Hello, everyone. This is Danielle from Boomer Benefits here with a special three-part series for you guys today about the lovable income-related monthly adjustment amount, or IRMAA. And I have a special guest with me today. Benjamin Brandt is the host of the popular retirement podcast, Retirement Starts Today Radio, where he tackles the topics on the minds of the modern retiree. And when Benjamin isn't talking about retirement topics, he and his wife can be found chasing their 6 energetic children. Well, welcome, Ben. I would imagine that does take a lot of energy.
Oh boy, you should have seen me a full head of luscious locks before I had kids, let me tell you.
My sister has 4, and I think that's a lot, so I can only imagine. Over here, we deal with the furry kind. They're watching me out the window right now.
We have those too. We love them too.
Good, good. Well, thanks so much for joining me today. For those of you listening, Ben and I are friends through the finance community, and I've appeared on his podcast a couple of times, and we were talking about the fact that, he's a financial planner, I'm a Medicare specialist, and where our worlds collide is when we get to the IRMAA. So, Ben, do you want to fill us in a little bit about what is an IRMAA and how do you describe it to your folks when you're working with them?
Yes, your mean Aunt Irma, right? It's not just the lady that you meet at the family reunion, right? It's this letter that you get in the mail that said, "Hey, I know you're really excited about turning 65 and getting on Medicare, but just wait, you've earned too much income, and now you're going to be on an income-based Medicare Part B and Part D premium. So you earn too much income on the run up to 65, and now you got to pay more." And a lot of people don't see this coming, and people get blindsided a lot by it. They just get a letter in the mail that says, "Hey, you're going to have to pay up quite a bit more." And so hopefully it's something we can see coming and adjust for it. But for a lot of people, they just get that letter in the mail and it's kind of a shock.
Yeah. And we even see here at my agency, and I've covered this in my book, that a lot of people don't even realize Medicare itself has a premium. And then on top of that, if you happen to be in one of those higher income brackets, you can really add insult to injury after you think you figured out that Medicare costs this, and then you get that letter saying, "Oops, you earned a little too much, and so Uncle Sam's going to take their piece of that."
Right. Yeah. People say, what do you mean? What do you mean I have to pay in Part B? I paid in my whole working life into Medicare. There's this thing at the end. And yeah, so you pay in the Part A, which you always remind our clients of really well. And then so you pay in before and then you pay in after. So you get to pay both, but it's just different amounts.
Yeah, that's right. It's one of those lovely surprises that we get to have when we age into Medicare. And the thing about the IRMAA too is it affects both your Part B and your Part D premiums. And so one of the things that I find that our clients find confusing is that this results in you paying a premium not just to the Part D company that you sign up with, but then on top of that, you'll get the bill from Social Security for the IRMAA. And so we will sometimes get people calling in confused about, well, no, I paid my Part D on my Social Security. Why is my company drafting this amount over here from, whichever their Part D carriers? Let's say it's Humana or Blue Cross. I'm also getting this bill and I don't understand. And I think that is also something where a lot of the moving parts just cause a big piece of that confusion too.
It's such a big life change, retiring and then transitioning away from your employer-sponsored plan and then transitioning into Medicare and then the prescription drug plans along with it, and then additionally have this essentially what's a tax. I know it's not technically a tax, it's a premium, but to have this new bill show up can be kind of shocking and it can be disappointing.
Yeah, and I'm curious to know from your perspective and when you're working with folks, how early do you often get people asking you about Medicare and Medicare premiums? About what age would you say that those questions come into play for your group?
Well, funnily enough, I would say most people don't ask. For most of the time, we're reminding them of that. So they're looking at your premium starting at age 63. And most people say, "Well, I don't have to worry about that till I'm 65." We had a new client this year that actually did a bunch of conversions on his 63rd and 64th birthday, expecting that, okay, I see that I have an issue with my IRA being too large. I'm going to do some large Roth conversions before Medicare, not realizing that they're actually looking 2 years. So unfortunately, there's nothing we can do because he was not our client at the time, and you can't really go about undoing these things. But it's especially difficult because they actually start keeping track before you turn 65. That's something a lot of people just don't understand. And why would you if you're not in the business like you and I are, Danielle? But
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we're going to really get into some of that too in the second part of our series where we talk about ways to lower that IRMAA. But I think the message there, and I would give the same answer from people that we have calling in, is you need to really start looking at this stuff as early as possible. So I often say there should be a class that's mandatory when you're 50 and you have to go and learn this so that you have 15 years to prepare for all these things you didn't know. That's never going to happen. We do our best to educate around here, and I know you do too, Ben. But I think, looking at around 60 to 63 is really important, since one of the things about the IRMAA is when they're assessing those premiums, they're doing a look back to what you were earning 2 years prior. So you do need to be thinking about it really no later than age 63, or let's say you don't plan to retire until you're age 70 and you add Part B then. About 2 years before you join Medicare is a good time to start diving in.
I think that's a great tip. I think the minute that someone retires and they can start to have a little bit of control over what their income is, when you're in your working years, whatever you've negotiated with your company, that's what your income is. And you probably don't want to do any conversions above that, because once you retire, generally your income has a little bit of a dip.
Yeah.
So the minute you retire and have control over that income, that's when I would start looking down the road to required minimum distributions at 72, but then also IRMAA when it starts at 63, and saying, okay, I can start to modify how much income I'm taking. I can be intentional with what comes out of my portfolio, and that's going to help me be more prepared for IRMAA when she shows up, if she shows up.
Yeah, that's right. And so it kind of goes without saying that the people this affects most are people who are 2 years out from Medicare, and also those that are just higher wage earners. Medicare sets a new limit every year, and I think for this year it is 88,000 for the individual and 176,000 for married couples is the threshold. And if you happen to earn more than that 2 years ago, you're going to be one of those lucky people that gets a letter in the mail.
Yeah, I agree. I think this really punishes super savers.
Yeah.
The thing that was exactly prudent to do on the run up to retirement is sort of the opposite of the prudent thing to do right after retirement. So when we're leading up to retirement, we want to be uh, focused on each individual tax year on their own, right? So we want to take all the deductions that we can and defer that income into later. So the better super saver that we are, the more we're going to have in our tax deferred account. But the more we have in our tax deferred account, the higher our IRMAA is likely to be, especially after age 72. I know we're going to get into that in some different episodes, but the people that I see blindsided and surprised the most by IRMAA are the people that did everything right, and they are super savers, are well adjusted to living on much less than they make, and they've squirreled a lot away for later. We got to undo some of that, or we're going to have to pay a lot more for our health insurance after 65.
Yeah, and that's really such a great point, because we spend so much time as a society financially educating people and advising that they be super savers, and then this thing just kind of can knock them right out of the water with comes out of left field sort of. And one of the things that we get questions on surrounding this that you might be able to give some or shed some light on would be, what is included in that modified adjusted household gross income for Medicare? So we know that when they're looking at your tax return, it's not just the adjusted gross income, but they call it the modified adjusted gross income, or MAGI. And people don't know what that is really. So do we have any advice for them about, what is that number really when they're looking at their tax return? And does that change from year to year about what box they're looking at on their tax form? If they're looking back 2 years ago at their tax return to see if they earned more than the threshold and are going to get hit with an IRMAA, what things are included in that modified adjusted gross income?
So that can be kind of confusing and intimidating for clients, right? Most people don't realize how much gross income they earn. Most people don't realize how much taxes they pay in. And tax forms themselves can be confusing. Most of us, myself included, we need software to kind of help us navigate these sort of things. So when people ask me, well, how much of my income is going to be included? It's essentially the biggest number. It's your gross income. It's the total income. And then if you have some things that are not taxable, like municipal bond interest, for example, is not taxable, they're going to add that back. So it's the biggest number. It's your gross income plus some of that non-taxable interest. So it's
Okay.
not, don't worry too much about itemization and standard deductions and things like that. It's the big number.
Okay, so that's good. And probably not what they want to hear, right? But it's best to tell people the truth. How would you say, how many people are surprised by this, or maybe don't know to plan for it until they meet you? If you had to just tell us a percentage of the people that are coming in and working with your firm and saying, let's say they are either at Medicare's door or close to it, would you say that it surprises most people?
I would say it sort of depends on how they find me. So if they find me from my podcast, we've featured you on the show before. We've talked about this. It's generally not going to be a surprise to somebody that finds me from the show. Somebody that finds me outside of the show and doesn't know that I have a podcast here, they're almost always surprised by it. So
Yeah.
it really depends on where they find me. But if they come to me through like financial media, right, they're somewhat prepared for this. But if they come to me from just they know me off the street or a referral of a current client, then generally they are surprised by it. So it's something that is just not, and it's Medicare and it's taxes and it's just things that if you're not already interested in finance, you're not going to be naturally drawn to it. So it's to be expected that it can be a surprise for people.
Yeah, and that really kind of leads us into a great segue for where we're heading in our next part of this series, which is now they've met you and they didn't know what they didn't know, and they're looking for tips from you for avoiding or lowering the lovely IRMAA.
We're going to do something a little bit weird, and we're going to talk about voluntarily paying more taxes now with the hopes of paying a lot less later. So,
Ooh, great little cliffhanger there, folks. So stay tuned, and we will have another episode, part 2 of this series with Benjamin Brandt for you on YouTube in just a few weeks.